The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. A 2015 recipient of the Best Local Podcast by the Creative Loafing of Tampa. You are tuned in to Hoppe Hour.
What's up? You are tuned in to Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and on the phone line, he is the host of Chad Dukes versus the World on 106.7 The Fan, and he is the host of such podcasts as Chad Dukes Rodkast, Big O and Dukes, and the Chad Dukes Wrestling Show. On Hoppe Hour is the one and only Chad Dukes. What's up, man?
I didn't realize you were such a big deal. Would you now? So you booked me on the show. I got a text message from Club Soda Kenny. He was very excited.
Dude, Kenny is my guy. He helped me get Jim Norton on my show when Jim was in town about 10 months ago. Ken is one of the funniest guys I've ever met.
Yeah, Jimmy's amazing, and Kenny's it's funny the way they portray him on the show. He's a good dude.
How awesome was it for you to have Anthony and Opie on Big O and Dukes? Because I saw the thing you wrote on 106.7 The Fan's website about how Opie and Anthony influenced you. And I can just imagine, as a radio geek, that must have been surreal for you, Chad.
Yeah, man, it was a big deal. I don't think Opie's done any interviews or very many interviews on podcasts or otherwise. So getting him was big. I've been an O&A fan forever. I honestly, if Anthony hadn't been fired, I don't know if we would have been able to get him on. But, I get to interview a lot of athletes and, a lot of people that have been in the news or whatever. But having people that you listen to 4 or 5 hours a day for years, that's always going to be more of an impact. And, yeah, I just think they did some groundbreaking, provocative radio. I'm a huge fan. So getting the chance to have them on the show that I'm doing it's always going to be a thrill.
Now, I grew up listening to Opie and Anthony on 105.9 Free FM in Chicago, and I have my reasons of why they influenced me. But for you, Chad, what was it about O&A back in the day that influenced you?
I was my whole life. Like, I always listen to Stern and Mike and Sports Cheese, Greaseman, stuff like that. But, O&A I'd never heard anything like what they were doing. They were locking women in 50-gallon drums and throwing eels on top of them. You could never get away with it now, but the shock factor drew me in. But then they're really good at taking topics and turning them into entertaining conversations, and that's kind of why I got into talk radio. The solid back and forth and not being censored or politically correct. We need more shows like that than ever right now in our society. I think that's what probably made me a fan. How
much do you miss the free FM format? Because to me, I think it could have worked if it was done right. What is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It could have. First of all, naming it Free FM because you're so terrified of Howard going to satellite was dumb. Having, the fact that now all we have is political talk and sports talk is just so limiting. It's stupid. It's just catering. I think sales has a lot to do with it. I think it's easier for salespeople that don't pay attention to the product to say, hey, we talk about football. Hey, we talk about right-wing politics. It's just easier to get out there and sell. And I think that had a lot to do with it. The diary system was very different from PPM. If your listeners are familiar with that, I think it makes it more difficult for talk radio. But of course I miss it. I would, go back to that in 10 seconds. I'm happy with the gig I have. I'm lucky that I've been able to work with students for the years. I did Free FM out in Arizona on 101.5. They were one of the stations that Adam Carolla got to replace Stern, and it was an enormous amount of fun. And I had my druthers, whatever that format's called now, Guy Talk, Hot Talk, whatever it is, would come back. I think there's a place for it. I'm glad down in Tampa it seems to have a home, and it has a home on satellite. I think it's something that is inevitable that it comes back, but I've been waiting, 10 years now for that to take place. I hope we don't have to wait too much longer.
Now, would you ever want to be on XM radio? Because I feel like you guys would fit in perfectly on, let's say, Opie Radio or on after Jay Thomas or Covino and Rich. Would you guys ever accept an offer?
Yeah, well, who in radio wouldn't? I think there's an enormous amount of freedom over there. I like being on broadcast radio. I like being free. I like being in people's cars. I would like to keep the job I'm having now and also have a presence on satellite. Just the creative liberties are intoxicating on that side of it. But I don't think you have to be constrained for that. I also think that, XM is wonderful, and I think it's a great service, and I've bought it since it arrived. But I don't know. Are they developing new talk shows? It seems to me like there's an enormous amount of capital tied up in one or two shows, and then I don't know what else is going on. So, yeah, of course, and if anybody would have a conversation, I think anybody in this business probably would do the same.
So how do you find prep for your show on 106.7 The Fan when it's a slow sports news day? Because at least with FM Talk, you can find things to talk about. But what is the key to having a 4-hour show each day, even when there's not breaking news in Washington, D.C. for sports?
Well, the great thing about doing sports talk radio in D.C. is that it's a transient market, and nobody here is, we have a very group of sports fans that most people are like me. They want to hear about football, they want to hear about big stories, they want to hear about the local teams, but they'll talk about what their favorite side dish for Thanksgiving is. They'll talk about what the best burger they've ever had at a fast food establishment. And what I do is just try to think about what I would want to hear on the radio and see if people respond to it. So if there's nothing going on or the Wizards are horrible, which they always are, I don't have to talk about them. I'll talk about something else. And luckily I've got a boss that knows that. He came from a hot talk background. He was a producer, came from the programming side of things, and understands that, I don't know. I know we're sports talk radio. I talk about a lot of sports, but the story of the day is that's what we should be discussing. And in Washington, D.C., there's lots and lots of big stories, so it makes my job kind of easy.
What are some things about the Washington, D.C. radio market that people may not know about?
I think it's probably like Atlanta, like Phoenix, like Los Angeles. It's one of these markets that it's got to be treated differently because everyone's from someplace else. You have the federal government right there, so everybody's coming from other parts of the globe to work in your area, so they might not know all the landmarks. They might not care about all of the teams, and that's unique. If you're working in Pittsburgh and you talk Steelers, people are going to listen. You work in Boston here, so it's easier. And I think it comes with some of those unique challenges, but also I think some of the greatest talk shows of all time have been based right here in Washington, D.C., Don and Mike on down. So, it's a nice hotbed for talk radio, and I think I benefited from that, and I've definitely fostered a lot of listeners because people cultivated that environment before I got here.
Now, you've done radio in Phoenix, in Baltimore, in Washington, D.C. Over the years, who are some guys that have mentored you and helped you along the way getting into radio and improving as a host each and every day?
Well, people that are in my life that have mentored me that maybe you wouldn't be familiar with, but some of my influences, like you said, O&A, Corolla, Stern, Don and Mike. My program director's name is Chris Keinert. He was the producer of the Sports Junkies, who have been here for 20 years. A guy named Cameron Gray. He was the producer of that show. He works for Sirius now. I have lots of people, man. The good thing is that a lot of insecurity is festering inside of radio, but there's still good people that want to help the next generation. And that's why, I'm 37 now. I'm hardly a young buck in the business, but if there are interns, if there are people that want to be respectful, that want to learn, that want to do it from the ground up, that don't just want to fester in their basement doing a podcast, and they want to, see what it's like, I take pride in trying to help those guys out too. So that's kind of been one of the great things about being in radio is kind of being a part of that community and seeing that there are people willing to help others out to try to get established.
Now, Chad, what is your take on the future of radio, and what do you think about when people say that this business is dwindling by the minute?
Well, it's not as dwindling as everybody thinks. It's still vibrant, and I think content is king. I think if you have the content, people are going to listen, and that's why podcasts are successful, Sirius is successful, broadcast radio is. You got to show people they're going to find it wherever you are. I always tell people the same thing. You got to get involved. I started working promotions, running board, working on weekends, working on nights, hammering it out, getting the reps. It's all about, it's like anything else, man. Getting the reps is what's most important, and hammering away and not thinking that you're Jim Rome the first time you walk into a sports talk radio station. And it's something that, I don't like to just completely stereotype all millennials, but I feel like a lot of millennials think that if they are doing a podcast in their basement, that somehow equates to them building skills to be a radio host. And maybe to build skills for you to be a podcaster, but if you want to be a radio host, get in, work the free weekends, take any shift that's available to you, meet everybody that you possibly can, and do what it takes in any industry to, move on up the ladder. So that's always what I say. Do as much as you can with as many different people as you can, and you'll be successful.
Now, what is your key to having all of your podcasts get listens? Because there's so many out there, and there's so many guys that do quote-unquote internet radio shows that it seems like it's being watered down. So how do you approach it where you make it seem legit and you get listens?
Well, I mean, I'll ask you the same question. Why does Joe Rogan have 10 million listeners to his podcast? Is it because he's a podcaster or because he's Joe Rogan and people care about what Joe Rogan says? I'm lucky because I've done radio now for almost 20 years. Jesus Christ, time's flying. And I've built an audience, so they follow me. When I have new products, they follow me. Maybe there's a way to just start doing a podcast and to get a bunch of listeners just via that. I'm sure somebody's done that. That's not the way that I've done it. I was successful in radio, and that led to the podcast, and that led to people wanting to hear what I have to say. So, you know, podcasts are great, and the internet's great, and I think if you have a funny vine, that's awesome. But for me, I built a broadcasting career, and then I'm doing podcasts because of that. It's not vice versa, if that makes any sense.
Is there a part of you that's very annoyed at YouTube and Vine because it's so easy to be famous over a 7-second video, but a lot of times podcasts get overlooked? Or do you just keep on grinding and hope for the best?
I think talent, if you have talent, and there's different ways now that people can see that talent, it's a good thing. If that's YouTube and it's not just hammering, like, oh my God, I can't get on Adult Swim on Cartoon Network, I don't have a career. Well, you can take it to YouTube, and if it's funny and you can find an audience, then God bless you. Now, I'm not angry at those modalities of communication, but I do think there is value in doing it the traditional way and grinding the traditional way and learning business. I know that it's helped me. I know that it's helped me in my career, and that's the only perspective that I have.
What do you think it would have been like since you've been in radio for almost 20 years? What would it have been like if everything we have now, social media, podcasts, the internet, what if it was out back then when you first began?
It's a great question, man. I don't know. I don't know if I would have been tempted to just do the internet angry routine where why isn't anyone paying attention to me? And I have so many podcasts that I go on, and then 3 weeks later they're attacking me and saying horrible things about me. I don't really understand why. And I think that one of the reasons is lots of people, instead of being proactive, they sit around waiting for someone to discover them. And I didn't have that luxury. Maybe I would have done it. I'm pretty petulant. I'm a lazy guy. If I could have just sat and screamed into a microphone with nobody listening into a computer, maybe I would still be doing that. But I had to get up and go wear a cow costume for WMZQ. I had to give out, WJFK pencils. I had to work on Christmas Eve and running the board for shows that were more famous than anything I will ever do. So I think there's a lot of humility that's kind of built into that. I don't know if I would have had an option to do something else where I would be, but I know that one of the reasons why I think I'm somewhat successful right now is because I did have to struggle through all that nonsense.
Why do you say you're lazy? Because you do so many online podcasts and you have a show that does well in a top 10 market. To me, that's very successful. So to you, why do you call yourself lazy?
Well, because I have a 40-inch waist, and because I've worked real jobs. One of the things is I was 23 before I started hammering away at this, and 22, 23, I don't recall it directly, but I was working retail. I was doing plumbing. I was doing all kinds of crap. I know what a real work day is. And me doing 5 hours of radio and then getting in my car and then doing a 2-hour podcast, that may sound exhausting to other people. That's me sitting on my ass speaking into a microphone. And while it's fun, everybody can do it, and I definitely have a skill, it's not a hard day's work, and it will never be a hard day's work compared to people that are actually out there doing things and that have trades and have skills, and I don't have to wear a suit. I didn't have to get a BA. I didn't have to do any of that. So I will always look at it as I've somehow figured out a way to get over on society.
You know what drives me crazy, Chad, is when people that have made it in radio get lazy and they get ungrateful. To me, the day you get ungrateful and you don't want to meet fans and you're too cool for them, and I want to make sure I never have an ego like that where I'm too cool for anyone,
Yeah, I completely agree, man. And while, it's difficult, like people want to castigate Howard Stern because they feel like he's changed. And I don't know. What I've learned is that I feel differently every year. As I age and as I experience life, my views change. And I don't want to say I can't imagine. Last night we did a show, an election night show for Big O and Dukes. We had 250 some odd people show up and paid money to come see us do a live show. And I never want to get over how special that is or how good that feels, and going out and shaking hands with people that say things to me that I would say to any radio host that I grew up listening to. So I agree with you there. Like, I hope I never lose that.
I've been thinking about it too. It has to be weird to be like Howard, because you're one of the most known people in America and you're the top dog in radio and everybody wants to be you. So at times I get why he's so quiet and private, because I bet it's hard for him to know who to trust besides Robin and Fred and everyone on that show. I bet it's so weird that everybody wants to be you, you know?
Well, it's also genius is weird. Like, I've never met a genius that is normal, and I guess they shouldn't. And you know, I'd like to think I'm good at radio. I'm proud of my career, but I'm not a genius, and he is. And I don't know what it's like to be the tip of the spear in and that's what he has to deal with. So the fact that he doesn't do appearances at the local Verizon wireless store, I don't hold that against him. I think that means that he's lost touch.
Now, who are some shows that you listen to right now that people may not know about that you think are doing a good job?
There's a show called podcast I listen to called Liar City. It's excellent, very smart show, great topicality. I listen to Adam Carolla's entire network, but I think most people probably have heard of that. But there's one on there called Reasonable Doubt that he does with Mark Garagos, very famous lawyer, very informative show. What else? Hard Times and Weirdness is a podcast that we just signed to our network, and it's this band that I love that lives this crazy hillbilly touring lifestyle, and he just tales from the crazy-ass tales from the road, just all this weird stuff that happens when you're a band that tours 260, 270 dates out of the year. I don't listen to a lot of shows like what I do, just because I do that every day. I kind of try to listen to shows that bring me a different perspective or a different view that I normally would get from, let's say, broadcast radio or television or anything like that.
Here's one of the best parts, too, about shows that are online is that they can say what they want and they don't have to deal with this whole thing of being angry over words and fake outrage. That's one thing that drives me nuts, Chad, is when people get mad at radio shows and they call everyone a shock jock. As a radio geek and as a guy that wants to make it in radio, I hate that word, shock jock, and I hate fake outrage.
I don't even know how many of your listeners know what a shock jock is at this point, is because we haven't had shock jocks in a while. And to be honest with you, though, people have always been pissed. I mean, people have always written letters to the radio station. It's just easier now because you have Twitter. It's instantaneous. It's on the companies, man. It's on CBS. It's on Clear Channel. It's on Sirius. They have to stand behind their talent. They have to say, look, we want provocative talent that's going to get out there and say something that evokes an emotional response. And no, we're not going to fire this guy because you're outraged. I don't mind punishments. If somebody crosses the line and they get sat down, they get talked to, say, hey, man, we got to be mindful of this. It's fine. It's part of the industry. But it's notion that, okay, X said Y, and now you have to be fired because somebody's pissed off online. Sort of birds. As soon as these companies start to stand up and stand behind their talent, we'll all be better off.
Now, what I want to ask you, too, is you work in a top 10 market, so there's a bunch of egos, there's a bunch of competition. Is it ever weird when you see the rivals maybe out at a bar or out at an event? Or is it very friendly at the end of the day?
I don't care, dude. I mean, I might be working, the station that's our chief competition, I had an opportunity to work there the last time my deal was up. There's guys I don't like. There's guys I don't care for the way that they do their business. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. So I like a radio war as much as the next person. But no. If Sports Talk 980 is down the street from where I'm at, there's not going to be some sort of West Side Story dance fight that happens in the middle of the street. We're all trying to get money in the same cutthroat industry. So I don't have a lot of that in me, but I do. Nothing is better than a good radio war. It's my favorite type of listening.
Now, what happened about 10 years ago with the radio war that you got into with the other shock jock across the town in Washington, D.C.?
Who? Elliot in the Morning?
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't even me. That was the Junkies. The Junkies were moving to mornings, and they wanted to take a shot at Elliot, who'd been established and had great ratings. And there was an opportunity where one of their listeners pretended that he had booked Lance Armstrong on Elliott in the Morning's show, and I called into that show as Lance Armstrong. And, my idea was I'm going to string him along as long as I possibly can before I lower the boom. And we had probably, I'd say, about a 6 or 7 minute interview before live on the air because it wasn't taped. I let the guy know that it was for the Junkies, and he dumped out. This is why I don't know Elliott. I don't respect him though. He pretended like nothing happened. He just pretended like it didn't take place and didn't address it. And it's dude, come on, this is all fun and games. He was supposed to come to my. I was in a radio class actually at George Mason University, and he was supposed to come speak to the class. Bailed out, never rescheduled, and. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He's been very successful. He's had a nice career, but I don't like the cut of his jib. And it was fun. But that wasn't actually my feud. That was the Junkies versus Elliott in the Morning.
Would you say that the sports junkies are some of the most underrated radio veterans in this business? I mean, they're the one show that did well when it had to replace Howard about 11 years ago. To me, I feel like the junkies don't get enough respect at times.
I mean, they get respect in our market, but you're probably right. They were nationally syndicated. They've had television shows, and they've been successful. They've never had to move. I mean, they've never been fired. I mean, that's unbelievable in this business. And they're funny, and you can't replicate their chemistry. And I would absolutely not be in radio if it wasn't for them. So, yeah, I can't say enough nice things about those guys. And they probably should have been nationally syndicated for most of their careers, and the nation would be better for it. So if you're asking me if the Junkies are underrated, I would unequivocally say yes.
Now, I've had 3 of them on the show, just not Lurch.
I just know that Lurch makes perfect sense. Lurch doesn't want to do anything.
He's not online either. I couldn't find his Facebook or Twitter. But what I loved about them was they were so cool. They're like, of course, I'll come on the show. I didn't think Eric Bickel would get back to me or JP would get back to me. It's so cool when guys that act nice on air are just as cool off air,
Yeah, they're great guys. And Lurch is really funny. It's just I know that if there was going to be one junkie that wouldn't come on your show, it would be him. They're good dudes, man. And I've had my problems with JP probably for our entire relationship, but nobody has been more supportive of my radio career than that dude. I think Bickel is a genius. I think that Cakes is one of the best snipers I've ever heard in radio. He just has such great one-liners. There's no way you could recreate that show. And very happy that I got to know them. And actually, I feel quite honored doing drive time on the station that they're on.
What is some of the best advice they've given you over the years, or some of the best times you've been able to hang out with the sports junkies?
The best advice I ever got in my radio career was from JP when they were doing an appearance at a mobile home in Sterling, Virginia, and I drove out, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was working at Home Depot. And I said, how do I do what you do? I said, how do I become a host? And he said, you have to intern. He said, you got to get school credit. And I said, okay. And that same day, I signed up for classes at the local community college and got 75 credits so I could transfer to George Mason University. And then I worked my way up there so I could get an internship. And I interned for their radio show. And it was improved by my now boss, their producer, Chris Keinert. And I interned twice and got a gig after that and never looked back. So if I had to actually go back on my life and look at the best advice I ever got, it was from John Paul Flame saying, you have to intern if you want to be in radio. And ironically, you can't intern anymore because the millennials have started suing and costing people money because they weren't getting paid to be internships. So the corporations do what they always do. They shut down all the internships because they don't want to be sued. So I don't know. I don't know the best way to get into radio any longer because the way that I got in is no longer something that you can avail yourself of.
Dude, it's so embarrassing. About 3 years ago, that one girl sued Howard because they did not pay her while she was interning there. And my thing is you're with the king of all media, one of the greatest shows of all time. Appreciate what you have, man. That is what drives me nuts about people my age is they're never, ever grateful, Chad. It's annoying.
Well, somebody told no so many times in my life, and it's way more useful than when you're told yes. So again, we have to stiffen our backs and just say that, look, the parents aren't saying no at home. We're saying no. And again, I've met plenty of millennials. The kid who works for my show right now, it's a millennial. He busts his ass, does all kinds of extra stuff, and wants to do it the right way. So I don't like to cast those broad aspersions, but it is frustrating to see stories like that and know that, wow, the West radio is not even something that exists any longer.
What were some of the craziest things that ever happened while you were working as an intern for WJFK? Because right now I work in the promotions department at the Bone, and the weirdest things happen at these gigs where you're there from 12 to 3 on a nice hot Sunday. So what were some of the weirdest things that happened to you?
Oh, God, dude. I mean, so many drunks, so many people. Anybody that sees that you work at the radio station thinks that you're on the air.
Oh, yeah.
They think that you have the ability to and they think you're broadcasting live anywhere you are. I mean, just so many weirdos. I worked at a country station, and all the girls were afraid to drive the ice cream truck, so I had to drive the ice cream truck everywhere, and it was the size of a house, and the brakes didn't work. I got the station van stuck at a college once with Oscar and I. We had to get out and push it out of the mud. Horrible, awful things the whole time. I mean, I wish I could tell you how many times I was getting paid $6 an hour, and then I got a parking ticket for $50 because there was no place for me to park the station vehicle, and then I had to pay it, so the event actually ended up costing me money. It's the worst job in the world. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it certainly does give you perspective on how good the radio industry is when you get out of it.
You know what's very annoying too is when these people come up and they go, I love the Fan, or I love the Bone, and you go, what show do you like? And then they go, oh, the music you guys play is amazing. That's what drives me nuts is whenever these people come up to our tents and they claim they listen, but they know nothing about the shows. It's very annoying.
They just want free stuff. I mean, now radio, there's so much crap that just rolls to the station.
Oh,
I
yeah.
Believe it. I'm like, I don't even care about this, but if you took that out to a station event and gave it to somebody, it would make their millennium. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and know that it's been kind of omnipresent now for, I think, as long as the industry has existed.
Obviously, if it wasn't for our listeners, we would not be on air and we would not be doing well. But dude, Hot Talk Radio and Sports Talk listeners bring in some of the weirdest dudes of all time. Like, guys will be like, well, do you ever get girls' numbers at events? I'm like, dude, we have weird guys that show up to the Bone events. I can never break it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sports talk's a little different. For some reason, like, there's this weird phylum of good-looking chicks that are really into, like, baseball and hockey, and then all the guys at the station, they all take turns trying to bang them. I've been married for a while, so I haven't had to deal with that. But, no, I've never successfully met women doing what we do. I mean, if you want to meet good-looking women, you need to get into electronic dance music. That's the type of DJ you need to be, because you ain't going to get it hosting a talk show.
How mad are you that kids my age can get laid now via these apps? How well would you have done back in the day if you had Bumble or Tinder?
I don't know, man. I've never had the patience to be a coxsman, as it were. It is funny, though. I mean, it is going up and talking to women at bars is something you don't even need to do anymore. I mean, but it's not just kids your age. I mean, my friends that are single are on all of these websites. They're swiping right. So it's not like it's just for people of a certain demographic. It certainly is way easier than it used to be, though.
Now, what do you think of the whole smartphone thing we have right now in 2016? I'm an addict to my phone. It's not healthy, and I'm trying to work on not using it as much. What is it like for you? Because I feel like when we work in radio, it gets to our heads that people are giving us tweets all the time, you know?
Yeah, and what I have to work on is it's just a snapshot of your audience. Now, you look at Twitter or you look at Facebook, and you're like, oh, someone's not responding to this, or this segment didn't hit, and you realize that, well, I mean, how many people have a Twitter? It's a dying, modality of communication. So, the one thing I do like about it is I have access to all the shows that I like to listen to anytime I want, right on my phone. I mean, that has spoiled me, and I like being able to, if I want to go in the studio and do an extra Rodkast or whatever this week, I can just bang it out and throw it up, and people are going to have it, 10 minutes later. I like that part of it, but you're right. I hate the way it takes out of conversations at meals and at bars, and how people just spend their life now looking to a tiny screen instead of actually experiencing them.
Now, for people that haven't heard your shows yet, why should they tune in to all of your podcasts and your show on 106.7 The Fan?
Oh, I don't know, man. If they like sports, they should tune into 106.7 The Fan. I like to think I'm funny. What I would say is that people can get very uptight and very sanctimonious doing what they do. I'm the opposite of that. I like to have a good time. I like to trash talk. I like to self-deprecate. I like to curse. I like to be politically incorrect. I like to make racial jokes. I like to make sexist jokes. I like all the stuff that you do behind the scenes and then tell your girlfriend or wife you don't do. I like to do all that stuff. And it's funny. And I don't think it makes you a bad person. I don't think it affects the quality of your character. And I think that if that's something you're into, you'll probably like my brand of humor. If not, if you're easily outraged, I would steer as clear as you possibly can.
Now, where can people find your work online and on the radio?
Well, I mean, they can check out the station site. I'm at Chad Dukes on Twitter. It's an easy place to go. I'm all over everything. So if you just want to go to, a good place to start, just go to bigoandukes.com. Fun show. I've been doing that for 12 years now, I think, with a couple of my buddies, and it's a lot of fun. We have a great, it's not like a radio host and their listeners. Like, honestly, I think we built a family over there. So check that out. And then if you think it's funny, then all the other stuff should be easy enough to find.
Well, dude, I've been a fan and a listener for about 10 years now, so it was a ton of fun to have you on Hoppe Hour, Chad.
It's my pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. And just keep hammering. And I'm sure everything is going to go great.
Sounds good, man. Have a great night.
All right, brother. You too.
All right, bye.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour is now over, but you can always listen 24/7 by getting the app or going to RyanHoppeRadio.com.